Well, welcome back. It's another one of Project Nassau. Joining me this evening is Edward Howard. How are we, Edward?
I'm very fine. Well, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, living the dream, brother. Living the dream. So, right, we see you got your Make Britain Great hat on again. So, use a follower or part of the Make Britain Great team, if I remember rightly, weren't you?
Yes, I was. I was there for nearly 2 years.
Right. What? So, just to start off with, what happened to Make Britain Great again?
Essentially, three things happened that essentially sent it on this. I'll give the TLDR version first. Essentially, Luke Nash-Jones, who headed the movement, who I had a close relationship with until October, this time nearly 2 years ago, actually. Well, essentially, he had snapped and gone completely, if I'm being honest, he'd snapped and I don't know what happened. He essentially snapped and felt like the movement had betrayed him or something. And he never really got over some things, and he shut down the website in a fit of anger. I'm not really sure. I was trying to comfort him, but it's clear that I think he just lost his way, and unfortunately now he's just moaning on Twitter still about Marta Costello and all the rest of it, which is ridiculous.
Oh, is he still on Twitter, is he?
Oh yeah, he's on Twitter. Yeah. But for the longer version, I won't make it too long, but there was three crucial events that happened. The first was the Justice for Our Boys thing, where when we found out that essentially, well, I wasn't hugely involved in the stuff, by the way, he and a few others were. When we found out who this group were connected to, that being Jack Sen of Liberty Defenders, who've been previously kicked out of UKIP for being anti-Semitic, and it's not like something that he hides. He's openly a National Socialist. He openly says it. Essentially, an associate of his was going to show up at this rally and give a speech, a very sweary, drunk one, it turned out, and they said they didn't want anything to do with it if that was okay, and we got a lot of shit for that. We got a lot of death threats. We got some death threats from Timothy Scott, who was the associate we'd called out. We had got threats of violence, a lot of unhinged, nutty behavior. And that was the first thing I think that's, hindered us, because essentially it was like, we couldn't trust everyone we worked with. And that was a bit of a blowback to us, because Luke had been close to James Goddard, one of the people involved with Justice for Our Boys, for a little bit. The second thing that happened was the bookstore incident, which you'll remember. I had no part of it. I was all the way back at my house because someone had come in, a guy called Rev Catboy, I don't remember his name, I wouldn't say anyway. He'd come into the pub we were in and started yelling, Trump. He said he had an idea of going to this bookstore, this communist bookstore, and yelling, Trump, Trump, Trump. And I was a bit like, I'd come all the way from a family holiday from the Isle of Wight, and I was thinking, I'd gone up quite early to go up there. It was my last speech of MBGA. It was about the BBC and how, they're biased, all the rest of it. And I thought I couldn't be really bothered with this. Some of them were already acting rowdy anyway. I mean, the third parties. And I only saw the footage like recently, like about a year and a half ago, and no one came pretty at looking out of that. And we never really recovered, because that was a stick to hit us with all the time. And even though our views sort of recovered, our reputation never really did in that movement. And I think the final thing, if I'm being honest, that broke the straw that broke the camel's back was what's his name? Marta Costello and Luke Nash-Jones. They fell out pretty spectacularly over the yellow vests issue. And I want to make myself a bit clear. I'm not huge on the yellow vests, because I'm not keen on some of their more violent behavior, because I grew up in the London riots during that time. So I'm seeing that in like Paris is not something I'm particularly keen on. And some of the more left-wing views make me a bit nervous, especially because they're more akin to sort of the 1968 unrest that happened in France. And essentially Martin backed the yellow vests, and Luke was not interested. So he told Luke and he essentially told Martin to, sling his hook. But essentially it was pretty bad time, because he essentially had cut off a good friend, it seemed, and he never really recovered from that. As in, like, it seemed like he'd been betrayed by everyone he knew, and he then turned it for the last few months into like a wedge, a battering ram against, let's destroy Gerard Batten and UKIP. And I thought that was a bit of a ridiculous thing, because whether you like Mr. Batten or not, it's just like, that's not the most important concern for an organization like this. I mean, I'm not saying you have to back or whatever, but I just thought it was a bit stupid, and in the end, it collapsed.
Do you think that he tried to do that? Because after the communist bookstore thing, they were suspended or dropped from the party indefinitely, weren't they, after that? So do you think that was he went after him because of that?
I think it was in part because of that. And to be fair, he tried to warn Mr. Batten about some of the more nutty elements of UKIP, like not as in like, oh, well, they disagree with me about immigration, but as in really fringe nut stuff. And he tried to call out certain people like Martin Sellner attending like the youth wing. And he was very much like, even trying to warn Joe Batten about this. And I felt like when he was thrown out of UKIP, you felt that was a slight against him. But to be fair, he should have known better than to go in there, because I've seen the footage of him going in there, and all he did was essentially, I mean, he eventually calmed everyone down, but at the start of it, it was like he was more angry they got shoved than some of what the other people were doing in that store. I mean,
to be honest, I think it is a very stupid thing to do. It's one thing doing it, but another filming it. You know, that's very it's just retarded thing to do. You know, I think you'll be an absolute idiot to do something like that and film it as well.
Yeah.
Just to follow up on that, because I know I just want to make clear as well, because I'm friends with Martin. You know, and I like Luke. I called Luke long after that happened. Well, basically see how he was, and he was very off key with politics. And I recently read that he was doing de-radicalization classes. I think when I read that, it might have been the Guardians are probably a load of crap, but I do wish him well anyway, and everybody. So yeah, for me, I've got no hard feelings towards anybody. Just want to make that clear. So if anyone's watching this and thinking, oh, you know,
I don't have any hard feelings either, but it's just like I have tried to reach out to him since. I have been a bit angry, especially when he went to the Independent and started slagging off like, oh, nothing was really his fault. And it's like, I would appreciate if he did take some responsibility, because the main things that were wrong with him, and I know because I recognize these flaws in myself as well, is that sometimes he was a bit impulsive and sometimes he was a bit paranoid, and I'm like that myself, if I'm being honest. But some of the things he was doing were just a bit, I don't know, just not good.
So following up from leaving that, so we know that went tits up and whatnot. But yourself, so you was a member of UKIP. You've joined the Conservatives.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yeah, and also I was a brief member of For Britain in between that for a year, and then I left because of stuff that I was really not liking. I mean, I've talked with Amory Waters since, who I have no issue with, but I'm no longer a member of any small parties. I'm a member of the Conservative Party now.
And recently there was a video that was released by Owen Jones on his YouTube channel, I believe.
Yes.
With you calling Matt Hancock a twat. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah, indeed. Him and George Osborne as well. But I think the
Gideon Osborne.
Yeah. It fits though, so I'm not complaining.
Okay, so just explain to us a little bit why somebody who's a member of the Conservative Party would call Matt Hancock a twat. I think he's a twat anyway, but why would somebody who's a member of the party call Matt Hancock a twat? What was going through your head at the time? And just explain to us why you do that.
I did it just simply because Mr. Hancock violated lockdown procedures. And admittedly, I'm not particularly keen on lockdown anyway, but that's neither here nor there.
So this happened at a conference, didn't it?
Yeah. To be fair, I didn't say it to his face. I said it just slightly a few meters from him, which was helpful, a few feet from him. And essentially, I'd said that because I just thought he's everything that's currently wrong with the establishment of the party. Like, I don't have a problem, if I'm being honest, with the party in terms of its base. A lot of its MPs are all sound. A lot of the people who are sort of thought leaders aren't too bad. It's just the establishment of the Conservative Party, which I've written an article about this for the Mallard. I've written several articles about this for the Mallard, which you should read anyway. But he's everything that's wrong. Essentially, got into his position because of his sort of stature within society. He came from a very, if I'm not mistaken, he came from a very wealthy sort of background, and he doesn't have any really strong opinions of his own. And he supports globalization because it's made people like him better off. And I just think actually there should be a sense of duty in the Conservative Party that's sadly missing from its establishment, which has gone really rotten since the Cameron years. And I just really wish that Boris Johnson would have been something a little bit different, actually, because after 15 years or whatever it was of Cameron continuation, something a little bit more to the right of Ken Clarke would have been welcome. And I just think Mr. Hancock is everything wrong with the party, but also him violating lockdown rules essentially was, I think, inexcusable, especially when he's, the guy in charge of all this stuff. And especially the way he did it as well was probably one of the most sleaziest I can think of. And the fact that Boris was wanting to defend him at first, as opposed to say, handing your resignation now, I think was only bad politically, because if you look at, say, the Batley and Spen by-election, that was soon after. If I'm being honest, like if we'd sacked him quicker, then we might have tipped that election in favor of the Conservative Party. But it's also because it's just wrong morally. But I don't know, it's just like what that cadre are interested in. I'm not saying anything against anyone particular. I just think these sort of people who are just London Liberal, Notting Hill set types are just the problem with the party, and they've that mindset is what drove the Labour Party into the ground during the Blair years. And I'm worried it's going to do the same with the Conservative Party, because if you look at the Cheshire and Amersham by-election, that election was lost on stuff like, say, people worry about the countryside being concreted over, about stuff like HS2, and unless the Conservative Party radically changes course on a lot of these issues, then I do think they're going to be having a lot of trouble. Once the middle class starts voting for the Conservative Party, as we've seen in previous elections, then politically they're done and they're cast into the wilderness for a few years.
Totally agree. I mean, that was one of my follow-up questions, actually, is, what are the Conservatives, conserving? So as a Conservative member, do you feel, Boris Johnson and the rest of the regime are doing a good job of, as we said, taking back control of our borders was one of the main key points of Brexit. Do you think they're doing a good job of immigration? Let's start with immigration. I mean,
fine. Well, bluntly, no, I would say. I like some of the rhetoric that's come out, and I do like the fact that we have moved to a points-based system. At least the system's in place which we can tweak, which is good. My problem is that the Conservative Party, ever since every election or result since 2015 a lot of it's been based on the immigration issue, or even 2010 actually, because if I'm not mistaken, 2010 Labour was seen as the least trustworthy on immigration, the Gillian Duffy episode, all the rest of it. Every election since 2010 has been on the immigration issue. That's been a tentpole. And on this case, I just think the Conservative Party have not done very well. I've written another article about their failings on this. And I don't think it's in line with most Conservative Party voters or the base. And I think a good chunk of the MPs aren't particularly keen on this. But just because I think a lot of the established class of the Conservative Party benefits from mass immigration, because a lot of them benefit from cheaper nannies and all the rest of it. I think it's also because a lot of them are more interested in what the donor class has to say. And a lot of the donor class, like the construction industry and so on, are more interested in, in having more cheap slave labor from other countries. And there's several facets on this, which Andrew Green wrote the head of Migration Watch, or former head, I should say, wrote something for the Conservative Home about this. And I've linked it in one of my articles. And also there's other matters as well, stuff on legal immigration not doing great at. They're also not doing particularly good, I think, on stuff like, say, the fact that they've announced trade deals with India, which is going to encourage more immigration from there. Nothing against people from India. I'm just saying we're full already. And according to Migration Watch again, we've had 7 million people come to Britain since 2001, which is the same amount as Turkmenistan or Paraguay. And, it's nearly 7 times the size of Birmingham, if anyone's interested. And I do worry that the Conservative Party, instead of reducing immigration, is just going to keep pretending that, they're not going to keep pretending they're going to control it. And it's not like in the last manifesto they use weasel words like, we'll control it, as in we won't do anything about it, but at least we'll have control. They openly said we'll reduce the numbers. That's in their manifesto if anyone cares to look. And I think they're so concerned with stuff like, say, net zero climate change or the left of the real racist talking points, that they're not interested in stuff like immigration, because they don't go to areas like, say, Tower Hamlets, or areas like, say, Boston and Lincolnshire, where they have a lot of problems with immigration. And I do worry this is going to keep building and building and building. And it's just like, if I told Owen this, but mentally he didn't put it in the thing, which is good. I said something along the lines of, as Pat Buchanan actually said in America, but he talked about the Republicans, if the Conservative Party doesn't end mass immigration or put an end to us, it's because Rishi Sunak's he wrote something for Policy Exchange back in 2014, if I'm not mistaken, that every single ethnic group, major ethnic group in this country, most of them, vote overwhelmingly for the Labour Party. I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing per se. I'm just saying, why would you import more people who are more inclined to vote, against you? Because America had a similar problem with this, where all the Italians, Slovaks, and Jewish people who came, most of them voted for the Democrats initially. And because they had a brief moratorium that stopped more people coming, eventually the votes became malleable because we assimilated them better. And I think there's no harm in doing that in this country, which I think there's nothing that solve, I don't think.
I think you're spot on. I think you're right. Immigration without assimilation isn't immigration, it's an invasion. And, that's what we've been seeing. And I just feel, for someone like yourself, who's a member of Conservatives, it's good to hear people talking out and speaking out about it. And seen on Twitter, I've seen a lot of people cutting up their membership cards and all sorts. And we've had a few Conservatives join us at the Heritage Party You know, obviously they're not very happy with the Conservatives and the way they've been. You know, like you just touched on there, they seem more interested with this green New Deal and this new way of green living than they are of, you know, the policies for which they were voted in for. You know, I don't
The
remember
main
voting for
person. Oh,
Tory as
sorry, if you
Prime
don't mind
Minister.
me.
Yeah, crack on.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to mention that actually. It's people like her who are the problem mainly, and it's not just the fact that she and the Goldsmith family have a huge part to play in this as well. They've been encouraging Mr. Johnson to do all this stuff, and Carrie Johnson is essentially like Jared Kushner in a lot of ways. Donald Trump's former advisor who encouraged him to go liberal in a lot of ways, and it's probably one of the reasons that Trump lost the last election. If I'm being honest, and what was it in the case of I don't, you know, and it's just like I don't mind these people having these views if they're congenial to public good, but they're not going to be. And it's Kara Johnson also has a lot of influence in other areas. The Bow Group, who Ben Harris Quinney I'm in contact with, does a lot of stuff on this. They talked about how she's had a hand in second advisors, Dominic Cummings being the most obvious casualty, and all the rest of it. And I will also point to the fact that what's his name, Nimco Ali, who's one of the advisors for the Conservative Party at the moment, wrote a couple of years ago on her Twitter account. She said nasty stuff about leavers, apparently. She said nasty stuff about a lot of people. In 2017, because I remember this very specifically, she tweeted out about how if Donald Trump and Amory Waters were periods, it would be, or something like that, the world would be better off. As in if they were never born. You know, with this elevator scene on The Shining as a gif, it's like, you know, why is someone that unhinged, you know, currently in hot with the government? And it's obvious why, because Carrie Simmons is good friends with Miss Ali, where they met apparently at the 2017 general election or by-election, I can't remember, to re-elect Zach Goldsmith. So actually, no, I'm not interested in people like that having a lot of power in Downing Street. And I don't mind Mr. Johnson having her as his wife, that's fine. It's just like she shouldn't be controlling the country. There's no other people I can think in comparison in terms of, like, you know, wives or husbands of former prime ministers having this much influence. I could be wrong on that, but we're not the United States where the first lady has some influence.
Yeah, you know that's rather concerning as well. You know, one thing I wanted to just another thing I wanted to touch on as well. Obviously, just obviously because you're a Conservative member, I can ask you, what do you feel about the way the Conservatives have, you know, handled, you know, this pandemic with the lockdowns and now we're getting to this vaccine and it slowly seems to be becoming mandatory. We've got vaccine passports. What have you made of it all?
I think that I've been against vaccine, sorry, not vaccine, but the lockdowns from the beginning because I believed in the whole civil liberties argument. I don't think they've been too bad. They could have been a lot worse. They could have been what Joe Biden's doing currently. Because to be fair, Sajid Javid, to his credit, has scrapped vaccine passports, and the vaccine uptake has been quite good. I'm not sure what people's views are on here, but that's fine. And I just feel that they've not been too bad, but I do think that to his, you know, I don't want to be too favorable about it, but there was a lot of pressure being put on people like on Johnson and all the rest of it to, you know, if you don't lock down, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. And to be fair, that would have tested anybody, I think. So on that credit, I don't want to give them too much, but I do think the lockdown was the wrong policy. But to be fair, it wasn't just him who did it. It was a lot of governments. So only Sweden, South Korea, I think, bucked the trend, and some others, but that's about as far as it went. So I don't think they've done too bad, but I just don't like the sort of like the eroding of civil liberties that's gone on. And we've crossed the Rubicon on that. I'm not sure if we're going to come back. Peter Hitchens is a great book about this. It's called The Abolition of Liberty, which you should go and read.
So yeah, I'll check that out definitely. So with regards to, you know, we just, you know, touched on lockdowns. With regards to the vaccine passports, that we're seeing now, you know, slowly, but that said that, you know, wasn't going to happen. I think it was Michael Gove said that, you know,
yeah, I know the one you mean.
Yep, and it's, you know, it is happening, and they are about, and you know, they're just hovering. We've seen them globally now, elsewhere, so it's only a matter of time really before they are, you know, introduced here. What's your views on that? You know, the U-turn of the Conservatives on that.
I think, well, one, I'm heavily against vaccine passports anyway, and I've written an article about this for Blue Beyond, which people should go and check out. But I'm just against vaccine passports in general. I just think the fact that the party is U-turned over this, because on the one hand, they want to pander to sort of like the lefty commentators they hang around with, like, oh, if you don't do this, you're going to be evil and all the rest of it, and loads of people are going to die. Or on the other hand, they're, you know, a lot of to their credit, the hospitality industry, a lot of these other industries are threatening them and lobbying them, telling, like, if you do this, you're in a lot of trouble. But what I do worry might happen is that if the government doesn't do it, there's going to be like, a lot of private companies will do it. I mean, any private company that goes ahead with this sort of stuff, I refuse to patronize beyond any sort of commitments I've already arranged. Like if any sort of like certain hotels, certain areas do this, I'm not going to go because I don't think that's right to coerce people like that. And Britain has a history of using identity cards are very telling they're scrapped. Like in the First World War, they were scrapped after the war's over, and Clement Attlee's government tried to keep them around after the Second World War in order to deal with communist threat, apparently. But not only did they not work, but they were ditched eventually by Churchill's government, who came back in because of how unpopular they were in court judgments, which essentially ruled against them. I just hope, like, if they do dare try and put this, there's going to be a lot of resistance. And to be fair, I think that the fact that there's a lot of resistance enough anyway is, you know, making them a bit cold feet about it. Whereas if it's Joe Biden, no one's going to call them on it. So it's like, hey, but I don't know. I just hope, but the fact that there's so many users, I think, just speaks to another ill of our politics, which is that people are so, what do you call it? There's such a dogmatic stuff because they don't have any opinions of their own. Like ever since the 1980s, that's been a problem where sort of like the old Labour Party, Conservative Party died and were replaced with a neoliberal new right thing on one end and a progressive new left thing on the other. And I just think the modern world from that front is a horrid marriage between Michelle Foucault and Ayn Rand, and that's not a world anyone wants to live in, I don't think.
Yeah, well, you're spot on. I agree with you. I think our conversation earlier was about politics, you know, shifting over the past 20 years, and it's shifted so far left now. As I was saying, anyone who's seen the centre is now seen as far right. It's gone absolutely crazy. Just before we finish, can you just tell people, you know, the viewers where they can find you, you know, your Twitter handles or your socials, what, you know.
Okay, my Twitter handle is Edward Howard 11, and I've got another one, Ed Interviews, and my YouTube channel is called Ed Plays. If you can't find it generally, you can find it through the Bow Group YouTube channel. And I'm on Facebook. I'm on all these social media services, and I'm on BitChute and Mixcloud as well, in case you want to find me. And yeah, that's all I really want to say. And thank you for having me on again.
No, you're welcome. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.